Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Randy T. I'm head of the architecture department. I am glad to see you all here for our third lecture of the fall. We have one more in a couple weeks coming up, which you'll look at the posters, please, and we'll of course drag you out of studio as well to make sure you're here. But I'm excited for this lecture, particularly with Jeff Kovel today. I'm really glad he could come. I think that we've been talking for several years about Jeff coming out. So, and you know, things like COVID have happened and so on. But I think you'll really appreciate the lecture. Usually I turn it over to our lecture committee. Thank you, you guys, Paul and Amy, for organizing everything. But I sort of feel like, well, again, Jeff and I have an actual history in the sense of like we have visited 2014, I think, or 15, we think, went to Skylab. We're not sure. It was a while ago. And then we've had this ongoing conversation about him coming out. But interestingly enough, though, I was just asking him sort of when he came to Portland. So Jeff went to Cornell. He's from the East Coast. Always wanted to come out to the West Coast. I'll let him say some of this stuff too. I'm paraphrase your life for you. But interestingly, I was saying to him, wondering when they started Skylab, because what I said was when I was in graduate school, we were aware of Skylab. We were like, there's a cool firm in Portland called Skylab. And interestingly, I graduated in 2000. They started in 1999. So the fact that he established something that quickly, I mean, again, it took a lot of hard work and there was things that happened before that. But nonetheless, that was kind of striking to me because, as I said, I mean, we all sort of knew like Skylab's got it going on. And, you know, you didn't even have a record at that point of like, oh, there's all these buildings you can point to. But it's amazing that, you know, again, the kind of the promise that was seen by classmates and other designers has been, you know, sort of fulfilled, if you will, in the sense of when you look at the work. I mean, it's as good or better than what we were reacting to originally. You know, Jeff started off with an interesting client, Lenny Kravitz. And we were trying to figure out, I had a classmate that somehow worked on this project before or after, but I remember him also saying, yeah, there's this guy in Portland, he's, you know, got this project for Lenny Kravitz's house. And so he must have worked for your boss. Is that what it was?
They were like best friends. So
okay. So in any case, so that's all really interesting. But you know, then kind of past that, coming up, and it's like the 12th and Alder building, I think was a fairly early project. And I remember that project is, again, these things where you're like in Portland and you're like, wow, what's that? And then you're like, oh, it's Skylab. So I've had a long kind of my own personal history where I've like Hood River, I was up there and I'm like, that's a great building. I bet it's Skylab, and it is Skylab. And then let's just saying when we reconnected, we were up at Schweitzer with my family, and I knew Jeff was doing a building up at Schweitzer, and we pulled up in the parking lot to find the zip line, and I was like, "There's Jeff's building right there," like, and it's fantastic. So there's a real kind of self-assuredness about their architecture in the sense that it's very. All of you who have enjoyed me putting some Vittorio Brigatti on you, the precision reading, the 3-page chapter that you hopefully have read, like these guys embody that, right? It's super precise and super self-assured in terms of what they're doing with form, what they're doing with materials, how these things interact with each other in order to culminate into the kind of architecture that they're making. And so it's super powerful stuff. And it's, again, super clear about what these architectural ideas are and how they're executing them, at least from everything that I've ever seen that they've done. And so that's the other reason, aside from just this long story about like, I saw this and I saw that, I knew of him in grad, like the architecture is spectacular. So with that, let's have Jeff tell us a little bit about it. So. Let's do this.
we shouldn't go down.
Okay, good. Hi. Well, thank you for the great introduction, Brandy. Thank you, Amy. It's really great to be here. I've been wanting to come here for a long time. I've spent a lot of time like north of I-90, but not south. So it's really fun to get in the car and drive down and kind of see this country. It's really beautiful, especially this time of year. But anyway, I'm excited to be here and share some work. I just got to meet with some students, which is great. Got my head in the game for kind of some themes and topics to talk about today on top of what I'd planned. Well, before I do that, so one of my favorite things about this lecture is this introduction slide, because people think our work is like black. And it's really funny. And I look at this every time I look at it, and it's just like this. Every one of these images is a project that we've done, and it's kind of crazy to see them together and just like the kaleidoscopic array of color that's been done in so many different environments. Like it's to me, it's just really like it's rewarding to see that we've been able to create so many vignettes that they can come together in this kind of beautiful wallpaper. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the nature of buildings is the title of this talk, and it's also the title of the book that we just published. For me, like nature and building are the two most important kind of creative aspects of my life and career. And so this building, and really more than the book, but really the body of work, really is an exploration of this kind of concept. And I went backwards over the last like four years and kind of built this book, and kind of trying to look backwards and try to figure out what are the active threads that we've been talking about, and then what are the things that we could learn by this sort of retrospective. And I'll talk about that in a second, but this is actually, that's me. They're both me, but that's me on the right in the little Adidas tracksuit in like 1978 or 81 or something. And that was my first kind of architectural experience. And it was a house that my parents built. I got to hang out with the architect and the contractors. And it was definitely during like the Lego phase of my life. And I just absolutely fell in love with architecture when I was 7 or 8 years old. And really like just been on a journey kind of since then with some level of confidence that this is what I wanted to pursue with my creative life and career. Not to say that everybody needs to feel that way, but just for me, that's kind of what was the thing. And so I went and I got a job. Went to Cornell. Was doing summer work in construction, out of school, had a bunch of design build opportunities. This image on the left is me and my first job, and I'm in Florida, working on Lenny Kravitz's house, which is this project. And this was a hands-on design build project. And I understand a theme here, which is really great, because this is something that I actively believe is an incredibly important part of the architectural education. We just built a shop in our offices so that we could actually have people do what you guys are doing in our workplace. But I not only helped design this, but I like framed that curving fir tunnel myself, which was you learn a lot about carpentry when you try to accomplish something like that. But out of this sort of the 1.5 year long experience of hands-on building this kind of exceptional house, and also doing the drawings and construction management, I came to Portland and felt like I was kind of ready to do my own thing. And I was really young at the time. I was 26 years old, and I started Skylab. And about a year into starting Skylab, I bought this piece of property. Or I collected some investors, I should say, to buy a piece of property that nobody thought was buildable, and design and build, like was the developer, the architect, the contractor on this spec home. And it was kind of the first project, and it was the thing that kind of launched Skylab beyond like the bathrooms and kitchen remodels that we were doing and all like this whatever we get our hands on stuff. This was our way of sort of being like, I'm in a New Yorker in Oregon, trying to build a firm. I want to show kind of what we're capable of, and create this project. And the reason why this starts with that is that sort of DNA of like development, construction, design, kind of wearing all these hats is definitely what I think is the sort of North Star in terms of what makes it a great architect. Today we're like 28 people in Portland. Diverse group of interior designers, planners, architects, people with construction backgrounds, musicians. This is the Skylab band. I play guitar in the band, which is really fun. This is my first band, so luckily they let me play with them. But we actually play. We were put together by Gray Magazine in Seattle, and we play all of their awards events, and it's super fun. But we have a very creative studio, young, very kind of culturally rich place. This is the book that we just published. This book's concept is based on a like double vinyl album from the 70s, 80s. And the reason why is like the act of making something like a book or an album, pre-digital was it was kind of the only way you could kind of connect with your favorite artists. Like there was no podcasts and there was no internet and there's no YouTube, and so like you would get this album and like it would be like Led Zeppelin physical graffiti, and you'd see the liner notes and the handwritten notes and shots of them partying backstage, and like it was the only way you could kind of connect with that band that you love or that artist that you love. And we really want the Skylab book to be like that for an audience, where it's not what you can get on our website. It's like it's a way to get to know us and what's behind the hood, Skylab, and what the experience is. So it's kind of in a way like our greatest hits album. And so we designed went through a long process. We designed the book to be like a double album. So we have the hole cut out on the front, like the hole on a record sleeve, and then you open the book and you kind of enter the sort of kaleidoscopic world of Skylab. And then we started using like text and materials and concepts, and really the same way we would tackle a project, we analogously attacked this book project. So there's like, it's a sort of like risky creative endeavor where text is changing and flipping around. It's not your classic dry, like perfect architect's manuscript. This is like meant to be like fun and evocative and draw you to explore it. And as you're working through it, kind of these discovery moments where you're getting to the projects and we're showing the process, but then there's these fold outs that are like rock posters. And anyway, it's really, really fun book. It was a great point for us to kind of look back and sort of see, well, what are the things that are important across the work? And what we've really evolved into are these three themes: narrative, regeneration, and actually, sorry, this is not speculation, is actually not the third theme. The third theme is construction innovation. But these are the three kind of pillars of our work. And so when we set out to make new work, we're thinking about these things. And the book is about kind of looking backwards and figuring out how to talk about that. So with regenerative design, regenerative thinking, it really comes down to this. Our architecture, the larger mission is to revitalize blighted places, designing with nature as an active partner. This is kind of the mission side of things. It's like human beings have just screwed up this planet pretty much everywhere. And, we need to develop things. We need to grow. We need to accommodate our society, but how can we do it better? And how can we kind of bring things into a better harmony than has been kind of our track record? And so for us, like that's really our core mission. We think about it like coming into a project, like we are naturalists, like how, what was on this site before it was a parking lot, before it was a city, it was a meadow, it was a forest, where the native peoples here, right? And we kind of look backwards and then try to take that, try to bring that back into the final product. This was a really early project. It was called the Weave Tower. It was a building downtown, and it was our first sort of foray into like bringing regenerative landscapes into urban spaces. So it's a modern tower, but the roof was a innovative stormwater garden. And that project actually didn't get built because the recession in 2008 happened. But that thinking and that seed led to a whole series of explorations. The first and one of the most important is the Columbia building. This is at the city of Portland's wastewater treatment plant. And we won an RFP really early in our kind of firm's development to add kind of the first building designed for humans at this plant. And when we got this project, there we go. They had planned to build a building right here and take out all the trees that had grown. And we won this project by proposing that we slide the building out, protect the trees, create this kind of formal garden, divert the road, and let this building become the kind of gatehouse to this new kind of campus education center. And this was in our kind of RFP response, was this sketch that we did. It ended up being slightly different, the outcome, but kind of it had inherent to it that process is essentially the idea was build the building over the parking lot instead of over the trees. So when we start a project like this, what we try to do is deep dive into the subject matter and really try to figure out how can we learn about this place and what these people are doing and use those ingredients, develop those ingredients to create a unique outcome. So we really studied kind of the architecture there, which was all this concrete work and all these turbines and grading, and there's a whole kind of visual language. And then more importantly to us was like what happens here? Like there's all these tanks and pipes and whatever, but like what are they doing? And so our client was like, they were really confused by this, but they're like, why are you guys diagramming the sewage plant treatment flow? Like we want you to design a building. And we're like, well, we have to do this before we can do that, because if we don't understand this, we can't tell the story that we want to tell in the building. So we became pseudo experts in wastewater treatment, and then came up with a scheme where the building would essentially become the security berm for the site, and also a demonstration of the stormwater management practices. So all the green roofs, all of these scuppers, where when it rains, you can see the fresh water coming down, draining down these culverts, collecting, going back into the treatment pond, and sort of telling that holistic cycle about the watershed and trying to connect this sort of abstract concept of water and wastewater with the natural systems. This was the site plan we developed. And one of the cool things about this site plan is that our biggest question was like, how much flow is moving through this plant? It was like the one thing that was impossible to like visualize. So we wanted to use the circumference of our garden as a way to sort of demonstrate the plant flow. And so the plant flow fluctuates from like 450 million gallons in the winter when it's raining to like half of that this summer. And so it's kind of hard to see here, but this circle right here is this circle. And inside the lobby of this building, there's a virtual meter that shows this now, so you can kind of relate to the concept in its physical way. It's a plan of the building, and it's kind of just showing how all the kind of secure spaces, storage rooms, bathrooms, conference rooms, they were all used against the berm to buffer from the train noise and the public. And then the whole garden side was the office space, and it has all the windows kind of looking into the garden for the staff. So this is the sort of secure side with the vegetation growing in. And then as you move through the building, we start to tell the story. So this is a watershed map that we inkjet printed onto a glazed block behind the reception. And then you get into the spaces, and the spaces are very much like abstractions of all that construction that they were doing there. So the concrete tanks and the grading and, this those and the turbines, right? All these windows kind of are in a turbine layout. They're all kind of a reinterpretation of that story. And then as we go layer deeper, it's like we look for those other ways to tell the story. So like the tile in the bathroom is like the cellular molecular structure of foam. The graphics in the lunchroom show the history of the plant. The signage moments tell the species that are endangered that live on the site. You know, and really trying to have this holistic experience where it's like it's not as the building interpretation of the place, but it's also a place where like school groups can come and learn. And we saved a bunch of artifacts from the city's big pipe project and made them like pipes where you could actually walk through the pipes are underground, so you can start to explain to people like the scale of this infrastructure and whatnot. So really cool project for us. That building was 12,000 square feet, so it's a really small project, but really big impact. From there, we started working more variety of projects. This is the 12th and Alder building, which Randy mentioned. This was actually the Skylab offices on the left, and I lived upstairs. And again, this is that kind of example of taking a small project and sort of maximizing the outcome. We took off the roof of this building and rebuilt it, and we created this window where like basically the view on the site is now the view of the church spire, which was like the most interesting thing about the site, but the building didn't react to it previously, so there was no way to really appreciate it. So we created this kind of framed moment window skylight piece where you get to see that. That project, downtown Portland, led to Yard, which is after that 12,000 square foot project. Our next project was this 350,000 square foot project, and this was a competition we won with the city of Portland development agency to rethink the Burnside Bridgehead. This had been all owned by one developer, and they were going to tear everything down and build a Lowe's home improvement store and like a totally unified collection of buildings. Unfortunately, that got killed in that recession I was mentioning. So afterwards, the city put it out to RFP and broke it up into pieces and said, let's get a bunch of creative people to look at this and come up with a different approach. So when we got involved, our site is essentially this parking lot, or actually all of this, both this parking, actually, I'm sorry, no, sorry, this is the site. We built another building here later, but this was all truck storage for this cold storage. The Burnside Bridge skate park is under here, which is a really globally famous kind of component, but essentially it's a big parking lot. And the idea was that we needed to get humans to come back and kind of reclaim this light industrial space. And for us, that, it's like, how would you do that? For us, the obvious answer was to lead with nature. And if we created habitat that humans would want to come back in and be in that natural habitat. This is an example of just like a DNA sheet for us. So where we're doing these like collages of imagery. Most of it's not architecture. Most of it's just inspiration coming from lots of different places. And it's kind of helping us build the visual language and the sort of the cultural outcome that we're trying to create in a project. But for this project, the scheme was really cool. What we said was, okay, this is a parking lot now, let's make it a park. And let's make that kind of the North Star. So we said, if we can reestablish this as nature and sort of save that amount of nature, that would be like the win. And so we said, okay, let's take the park and we'll lift it up to the bridge level where it can be seen by all the traffic. This is the main street in Portland. We'll tilt it so that it sort of, it's a metaphor to like the natural riverbank that used to be here before all this stuff got built. And we'll kind of protect it and pack parking and retail underneath it. And then we started looking at the tower and sort of how are we going to put this housing tower on it. And it was really interesting. Like we looked at all the kind of traditional L shape building, north, south, a building, east, west. And And we discovered that if we took the diagonal, the bias on the site, that the units, we'd have a longer bar, so we'd get more real estate. And then the sun would hit both sides of the building, so we'd have morning light units that had mountain views, and we'd have evening light units that had city views. And then it would allow us to essentially get this green roof, restorative kind of native landscape to terrace down with it. The other thing that was happening on the site that was of interest, and this was a little bit of a happy accident for a minute, was that the site sits over the big pipe. This is that giant pipe section I was just showing in the other Columbia building, and it runs diagonally through the site. And then the other thing that's happening is the soils are completely dropping off because this is the riverbed. So our site's like here. So this whole corner of the building is cantilevered off of the subterranean condition. I just find it really interesting. Most people don't think about like structural cantilevers happening underground, but in this case, like the rotation of the building and this pier system was the key to us being able to develop this. And it was the building was working, design was working in concert with the geology. This is the finished building. You can see the tower. And one of the cool things about this project, any other tower would put the roof garden on the roof of the tower, and they're like basically gated communities in urban areas. For us, like we wanted to democratize this. We were like, we want to build this park, but we want people to be able to access it. And so by not putting the garden on the roof of the tower, by putting it on the podium, we added, we made it accessible to the public, and then we added businesses up here to help monitor it. So this kind of lit area here is called Knot Springs, and it's a hot springs, like a soaking club. That's like a social club that's based on hot springs. So Idaho hot springs, British Columbia hot springs. It's a whole like membership, yoga, sauna, steam. Here it is on the right, environment. And this was a business that we created in this project, that now we're doing one in Seattle, and we have conversations in a few other cities going on to expand this kind of nationally. But it was really just us thinking about like, let's not do an amenity like everybody else. Let's do a really unique amenity to this building and have the win-win of attracting new tenants, but also creating like business that could help monitor and open this podium for the public. And then this is one of my favorite Skylab images, because it's like, this is all built, like that, like this garden we're looking through is part of the architecture. And it just really demonstrates that like architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about like settings and creating those settings. And for us, like this is a setting I want to spend time in. And this is in a pretty harsh urban environment. And then one of my favorite images of the building is this BLM protest that happened, where the whole sit-in on the bridge, and the building was like this sort of iconic obelisk at the end of this image. And you can see how this building kind of now like sits into this kind of light industrial area and really kind of brings it to life. So while we were finishing that, we started thinking that there wasn't enough development around here for our retail tenants to survive. So we went to the city of Portland and said, there's this weird, they had created the Cooch couplet, which is this, they took a two-way street and made it a one-way street. And when they did that, they bifurcated this block and they made these two kind of odd development chunks. And we said, we'd really like to tackle this and see if we could actually land our garden onto the other side of the street and create enough kind of body heat for foot traffic for our tenants to survive better, to be more vibrant. So we convinced the city to do that. They sold us that site. We went through a lot of variations on it, and actually we ended up moving away from the green roof idea because it just wasn't economically feasible. Like, in order to develop the site, we needed more space, and by the time we got to the developable space we needed, there was gonna be one of those private roof decks, and we didn't think it was the right move, and so we instead like really leaned into the shape of the site um, and sort of came up with this idea to do a cross laminated timber building. There was basically no laydown area on the site, and so we had to do kind of like on-time deliveries, and we had to build this in a really smart way because the traffic, this is basically the main artery of the city, is on two sides of this. And so we came up with the idea for the CLT building. All of the wood and beams and everything were manufactured off-site. All the fittings were pre-installed, and essentially they came and erected it in a very, very short period of time. And then we were able, this is our building yard here, and then this is called the dumbbell, which is on that other side. But we were able to kind of insert this like sliver, and because we were this is the last building in, we saw that there was a bunch of kind of cheaper skins, and we wanted to help kind of ground this place. So we brought the brick in, and kind of a higher level of detailing, and just really wanted to help kind of help this neighborhood mature with these early buildings. This is pretty cool. When you're inside that building, you can see the yard and the green roof, and then the city views beyond. You can see how like rotating all of this towards the view was a really powerful move. The next theme pillar is construction innovation. So like the industry is kind of broken right now. Things cost, laborers cost a lot. It's hard to get materials. Construction is through the roof, and like rents haven't changed enough to really justify it. So it's getting harder and harder to make innovative, great buildings. And for us, like what we've done is really taken that and backed it into our process and said, with every building, like how can we try to outsmart the process? How can we bring an innovation to it which will help deliver better design in a more efficient way? And so we really have integrated that kind of thinking. So we like to use this like idea, we are inventors. Like how can we reinvent the system? How can we rethink the process? And this is an interlude about Home, which is a modular prefab system that we designed and patented. And the whole idea is that you've got these 100 square foot building blocks. They're triangles in this case. So when you put them together and ship them, they're making like a three-dimensional truss so that you can deliver buildings more complete with inherent like resistance to flexure. And also kind of arm clients with the ability to like say, okay, it's going to cost X amount per 100 square feet. Pick how many blocks you want, and we'll build something out of it, and we'll get you to, within reason, an achievable outcome. So it's almost taking like the blocks you were playing with as a kid and making an architecture process out of that. So really rethinking the whole design, delivery, client, construction system all in one idea. The first project we did out of it was this house in Portland. We found a client that wanted to be our guinea pig, and it's called the Ivy House. And this was such a cool experience. Like, this was probably the first really whole prefab project in Portland. And the day that it arrived, there was like 200 people on the street. The trucks came up. It was like theater. The blocks started dropping at 9 a.m. and at 5 p.m. there was a building there, and it wasn't there earlier in the day. It was really amazing. And for us, like that modular line of thinking has really resonated. And we just installed 2 weeks ago a modular house in Utah. A lot of our clients are coming to us now because we think like this and we have this experience, and it's been a really strong vein. That same home system, we did a commercial building in Utah called the Sky Lodge. This sits on the top of Powder Mountain ski area. The DNA of this was like something that felt temporary in a way, like a polar research station or an encampment. And wanted to have those kinds of vibes. So we came up with this idea to do 5 modules, and then these timber frame yurts. Like, I've always really liked yurts, but problem with yurts is you can't see out of them. Like, they're they have this accordion screen that's pretty tight, and then the windows are, if there are any, they're like plastic and they're probably dirty, and like they're cool buildings that sit in nature, but you have no connection to nature when you're in them. And so we wanted to rethink that. So we came up with this idea of doing a circular truss or timber truss in wood, and then a timber roof that could withstand a 300-pound per foot snow load. But we used an off-the-shelf yurt skylight and roof system on it, so that it was basically like a repackaging. So the way this worked is the trucks came in and set the main modules, which are like a kitchen, a bar, bathrooms, back of house space, and then they started assembling these timber frame yurts. All of that stuff came on trucks from Seattle to basically Ogden, Utah, and when it went together, this was the finished product. So it was like a yurt that you could see this panoramic view out of. They're actually quite affordable. I think the frame, it was like $60,000 for this whole frame. And then plus the windows and it's probably $100,000 building, which, in a mountain environment at this size, like you could fit 150 people into one of these is extremely affordable. And then actually we just got to re-engage with the group that bought this resort, and we're going to probably create a different development here. And the nice thing is we can demount this and move it, which is pretty cool. But this is the inside. Really spent a lot of time working on this vinegar stain treatment for the cedar wood to give it the sort of age and almost like instant soul to it, which would have taken a long time to develop otherwise. And help this group kind of get a footprint on the mountain. I think this whole project was like 4.5 months of construction, start to finish, and a pretty quick design process as well. And then there's an idea, this was not going to happen, but then it was like, well, how can we take that and sort of keep going with it? Maybe build modular cabins, build a modular hotel, and kind of continue that thinking. This project is the Bodecker Foundation. We have sorry, that's funny. This is out of order, but I'll talk about this first. So this is Doug Fur. This was a project in Portland. It's one of our earliest projects. And this was again kind of feeding that construction technology piece. And this was a nightclub at the Jupiter Hotel, and we wanted to come up with this sort of story that would kind of like the old, before Howard Johnson's motels used to be really cool because they used to tell you a lot about the place you were visiting, and then everything got neutralized with national design standards, but we wanted to recreate that in Portland, and so we reinvented this club. And the material was log, and we brought it in from outside and built it inside the 60s diner. And it was kind of a precursor to that home system, in the sense that every one of these log pieces was pre-cut, numbered, basically kit of parts, and brought into the site. Sorry, that was supposed to be before the other project. But this Bodecker Foundation this is a kind of the pinnacle project for us, in the sense that it's adaptive reuse, it's new construction, and it's a design build project for us. So we were the contractor and the architect. Our client was this fellow, Sandy Bodecker, who he started Nike skateboarding, and amongst a bunch of other things. He was kind of like Nike royalty. And he came to us, and it was actually sad, but also, well, he had throat cancer and survived, and wanted to basically take the rest of his life and create a gift back to the community. And so he took basically all his earnings from Nike stock, and he wanted to create like a school and facility for creative people. And he came to us and he said, I want to do this thing. I don't know if it should be in Bend or Hawaii or where, but I wanted to have art and music and skate and silk screening and and I said, well, it's funny because somebody just like sent me this flyer for these buildings yesterday that I've been looking at forever, and I'm worried that somebody's going to tear them down and turn them into like some mediocre housing project, which is what is all around this. And we went down here and we walked through them, and this was actually, so the last thing this was this was a chocolate factory at some point, and it had this amazing, like, it's almost like they poured ICF, like insulated concrete forms, and then like acid erased the foam part or something. But it's this really interesting concrete texture, and then you have this building that is covered with ivy, and essentially he got really excited about them, and we started talking about those buildings as a canvas. And I've always been a really big fan of Gordon Maddock Clark, the artist that did these kind of erasure projects. This seemed like this really cool opportunity to take this creative act on these projects and basically do this right in the middle of the city of Portland. And so we came up with this idea that we were going to build a building inside of these existing spaces, and then like all of the quadrants were going to start to evoke like the other places he wanted to build, like Bend and Hawaii, and so we wanted to basically bring all those places to Portland was the idea. And so we started by basically coring out the middle of the building and building a new building in, and then bringing nature into that, setting up this diagram where all the roofscapes and all the courtyards and whatnot would be planted and would have kind of amenities to them, and the stormwater would kind of move through the project and down, all culminating in kind of a campground on the roof. So this is actually a slide right here. This is a outdoor shower, tent site, and then you go down, there's more roof decks, you go down. This is a miniature golf bamboo garden. This is a beachscape. As you move into the building, like his dad was an illustrator and author, and so his creative process became a big part of our interior. So like this is a custom wallpaper we made out of his illustrations. There's a custom upholstery, places where we can tell a story. We wanted this sort of like, you know, idea of like inspiration here, and we created this glass stair in the middle of the building that you can see through, and when you get up to the top, you can kind of see up to the sky. The mirrors in the bathrooms are fractured, so when you look at yourself, you see multiple perspectives, which is really fun. And then inside, there's a music studio. Right behind the music studio, there's this skate bowl. We got to work with Lance Mountain, this like super famous old skater, and shaping this bowl and just creating this like amazing kind of mashup of new and old and creative uses. And this is now a place where like kids, you know, come and cut albums and learn how to make art. And there's a lot of offsites and super inspired outcome. And then the last pillar for us is narrative. And, you know, for me, narrative is what the thing that gives each project its unique identity. And it's also the thing that keeps it interesting. If you come back to a project multiple times, like I see this as an analogous to like listening to music, that you develop a relationship with the song, and you probably notice different parts of it that you didn't notice, or you relate to things. And the thing that the project has, or the music or the architecture has, a life that kind of unfolds to you over time. And that's definitely how we want our projects to live. We want them not to be one-liners. We don't want you to go there once and kind of get it and walk away and move on. We want it to be this sort of living organism. And so that narrative piece, you know, becomes a really important part of our stories. So there's a quick interlude here, which is a house that we did for two families in Snowmass. This house kind of has all the pillars. It has a roof garden. That area is bermed into the ground. It has the modular frame that was built off-site, built in. But the narrative piece is like this family had been coming here for a long time as a brother and sister, and the house is a triangle, and it's basically symmetrical down the middle, and it's basically filled with their collection of art and family artifacts. And materials and that reference old houses that they've had, and essentially brings in a new way their family's story to life. On a commercial scale, that same approach kind of blown up in Schweitzer, where we got involved and sort of first with the master planning phase, kind of looking at their existing everything that been built over time, and then looking at the sort of DNA and kind of like the history of lumber and resource extraction, the history of the resort, the Swiss heritage that was the namesake of the resort, the old buildings that used to be here, and sort of started applying that sort of lens and narrative onto this collection of buildings that was pretty disjointed. Like these things have been built all different people, different times, no real theme or thoughtfulness, no space that actually was like nice to be in. Like everything's just sort of big and open and too far apart. And so we came up with an idea to build a building that would sort of insert itself into this existing space and start to create those kind of like alpine corridors and that sort of smaller scale like charm that makes, I think, what makes alpine places desirable, and in the process kind of rethink their whole drop-off area, finish we built an addition onto this building, connected to these pools, and kind of help them start to say, okay, how does this evolve over time? Could we actually consume this parking lot back? Like cars are not the best outcome long term. How can we move away from them, reclaim those spaces, and essentially set the seed for this project, which this is the exact opposite of a client coming to you and saying, I want to build a hotel. It's 32 rooms. It's on this site. Like this client had no idea what they wanted to build. All they knew was they needed to do something to help bring this place to life. And we helped kind of get to the point where we had a site plan, and then we started working on the hotel. This site has an incredible relationship to the lake. There's Lake Ponderay down here, and so you can kind of see that our building orients itself so that all the rooms shift, so that every room has a direct view to the lake, and that was partially in response to just the beauty, but also like that they're really trying to develop this place as a 4-season destination. And so it was like, how can we do that? It's like instead of leaning into the ski mountain, how can we connect to the other elements in the environment? So what we did was, this is a cross-laminated timber kind of public space, and this is the spa and ski locker building. All of that was built cross-laminated timber offsite. Hotel rooms were all panelized wood construction, so all the framing was done offsite and essentially brought in and clicked together. And then again, at the end of the building, there was this hot tub, roof deck / glass room, and we wanted that to be the first thing that you would see when you arrive, to really set the tone that something new was happening here. So this was a rendering during the design process, but how that sort of feature element would work against the sort of fabric of the hotel, kind of reach its hand out and sort of like, put a new face on the village, even though, we had these existing buildings still kind of to deal with. And this is the building as it was finishing out. I'm not sure how much you all know about cross-laminated timber, but it's a really significant thing that's happening in the industry. A lot of our work is in either urban hard to build sites or natural hard to build sites. So it's beyond all of the other benefits of it. It's really become a big part of our work because we're able to come in and build like a building in a winter environment and in a more efficient schedule. So we're able to get the concrete done and the roof on in one summer, and then work through the winter and open it up at the next summer after landscaping. Whereas before this kind of thing, these projects were sometimes taking like full 2 years or even 3 years to build. And it's really beautiful inside to express it. And, so we're spending a lot of time kind of in the design process, thinking these things through, figuring out where all the penetrations are, sprinklers, lights, speakers, just how to avoid conduit essentially, and try to ease the on-site construction process to achieve these like really beautiful structural expressions. Sorry, I guess this also just of note. I mean, in this building, we did all the interiors in this building, but this is another example of kind of that narrative piece and sort of telling the Humber story. This was the original mine lumber mill that Sandpoint sort of created on, telling the stories of people in the projects, bringing artifacts from our research to life, but kind of that process at the beginning of setting the kind of collage and the intention. That isn't just to do that in a successful project that will all come and form the kind of holistic environment at the end. And then this is looking out of that glass room back at the lake, that kind of feature space. In the hotel, we provide environmental graphics in, so each level of the hotel has a different season to it. So one's the lake, one's snowy forest, one's the summer forest. And again, just kind of reinforcing the client's kind of goals, I guess, through some of our choices. And then there's a couple projects in here that are around kind of how that starts to translate to commercial work. So when our client's a brand, not a house or not a resort. This was a project we did in Brooklyn for flavor paper, similar to the wastewater treatment plant. It was this is a wallpaper company, and the first thing we did was learn all about how you make hand silk screen wallpaper, which is basically like a lost art. And we came up with this idea to sort of create this almost like box of chocolates from the outside, where every room would have a different wallpaper pattern inside of it. And then on the ground floor, you could watch them printing the wallpaper, like in the mirrored ceiling, like a cooking show essentially. And so it was like, how can this brand, they have to build this building because they need the space, but how can this become like a major marketing kind of moment for them? How can we take what they do on the inside and kind of bring it out? Was our thinking. And this space here has usually has a crowd kind of out in front watching them work now. So a lot of that same pillars created that. I guess going from that 12,000 foot building to the 350,000 foot building, kind of while that building was in construction, we got contacted by Nike to do what was going to be named the Serena Williams building. This was stepping up to 1 million square feet, which we're a small firm. Like 1 million square feet is like it's like Levi's Stadium, like it's like an NFL stadium or like a huge airport, right? Like we're a 28 person firm, so this was a really interesting challenge for us, and it was 3 times bigger than anything we'd ever designed prior to this. Randy and I were having a conversation about this earlier. Like, it's really interesting challenge to start to think, okay, like how do you design something this big? Like, do the same kind of principles just scale up? Or like what's the right amount of design? What's the right amount of composition? How do you make, this is a building that houses 3,500 people. How do you make that like a whole experience for each one of them and not overdo it? So for us, that started by really looking at our client, and in this case, the named athlete had already been determined. So, we could really look at Serena and try to figure out what was inspiring for her and how are we going to leverage her story to create a unique building. And so there's a few things about her. There's a lot of things about her, but one of the most interesting things is that there's like this fierce warrior competitor side to her. Like, she hates to lose, and she'll like do anything to knock down whatever's in her way. But then she also like loves fashion and design and is a really soft, personable human being. And like, there's this like duality to her. And so we started thinking a lot about that duality as being informative. We also started looking at some other themes like the wing goddess. This is Nike, which means wing goddess, and looking at that kind of the wing and what does the wing mean? And we kept seeing like a lot of things that were interesting in here, like all the players in the team kind of forming a unified expression, or all the designers. This is their design studios at Nike, so all the designers in a group kind of working together. We also saw that as like analogous to like the watershed and streams, you know, creating rivers, creating lakes, creating oceans. And so we set out upon the design process, and like for us, our design process is very iterative, both in-house and what we share with our client. It's very much like we'd like to look at 2 or 3 things so that we're having a design dialogue, not a binary like that's right or wrong or good or bad. And it's something I really encourage everybody to think about. It's also like you draw one thing, like if you force yourself to draw 3 things, like you'll probably learn something, or you'll probably open up yourself to outcomes that you wouldn't have if you were just on a linear path. So here we presented these 3 schemes to the CEO of Nike and to Serena. These were, there was this one, which was based off a starting block on the track. And this was meant to be like the most affordable scheme. They're basically like rectangular buildings. There was this, which was sort of like, we were calling it the arena, I think. And it was about creating this like massive short, like almost like a stadium, like a space in the center. And then there was the wing or branch scheme, which was about the things I was just talking about, the watershed, the team, and the Nike wing. And that was what was selected by Serena and by Mark, and which was really amazing because it's a really powerful idea. That the idea was so powerful that it really let the whole rest of the project kind of happen in a very like intuitive way, where we weren't kind of fighting it. There was a lot to figure out because there's a lot of angles and a lot of kind of strange intersections. But essentially the way the building works is that it terraces down through 10 levels, starts with underground parking. The 2 red levels are actually like a shopping mall inside the building that's never going to be open to the public. It's all for like prototype retail spaces, because the idea is like in the top of the building you can start sketching a shoe or apparel or whatever, and you move all the way down through the design process and all the way to market essentially in one building. In addition to kind of Serena's muse, we also were looking at the kind of brand heritage of Nike. And as you learn more about Nike, you learn that Nike, it really started by Phil Knight trying to import Onitsuka, which is a Japanese footwear brand that are now here again. But his whole career started with this really strong connection to Japan. There's a Japanese garden on campus at Nike. And you know, one of the things that was inspiring us was this idea that this palace in Tokyo has this like fortress base. And we saw that as analogous to this kind of merchandising center, that where we were taking the intellectual property of like the design process and fortifying it in the base of this building, and then kind of expressing the design studios on top, and coming up with this kind of language, which this is like it's inspired by samurai armor, which is kind of in relation to Serena's warrior phase. The merchandising center actually has a sinuous stone band around it, which was more of her muse side. It has that sort of, if you squint real hard, it looks like the Tokyo Palace. If you know what some of those inspirations are, you can see how like the cantilevered forms and the tower expression kind of, you know, there's a lot of that in that. And that again is kind of like this building's skin and form was generated by ideas, not a preconceived notion of like what kind of building we wanted to make. And then as the building got developed, you know, we started bringing in more and more of the sort of green spaces, kind of our commitment to connecting with nature. We wanted to terrace the building down so it kind of tucked into the site, and it never got out of scale with the site. And then these green roofs would become spaces for people to, the Nike product cycle is very intense. Like it's like architecture school. You just go, and you finish, and then you have to start up again. And so we wanted people to be able to connect with nature and recharge. And one of my proudest thing about this site is that this south side of the building here has this stream. The whole campus has a stream running through it. Up until this point, every building on campus had just completely ignored this. So it's like the watershed, the sort of nature, the best part of the campus, everything it turned its back to. And when we got to this project, the Tiger Woods Center is here, and their loading dock came through here. And so they had literally put like a truck loading zone on the top of the most natural feature. And so what we did was we essentially buried it. So that road goes down here, goes underneath here, and then pops back up. And by doing that, this is the south side of the building. This is the cafeteria, which now has southern light, indoor outdoor flow, and it connects down to this running trail. And now the kind of front door of the building is this wetland, which had its back, turned onto it. There's some other really cool spaces. One of the things I like to talk about this building is that one of the things I've learned more and more is like the space in between things, or like as a musician would say, the notes you don't play are as important as the notes you play. This building being a branch, there's 5 gardens that basically interweave it, which are like these exterior spaces, which are as important as the interior spaces. This one we call Stumptown, and it was it's a northwest rainforest essentially that we planted. So you can see here, these are stumps and there's nurse logs. And we went in with the landscape architect and the sculpted wood and brought in plants and essentially jump started this sort of native garden. And that, that landscape piece is as important as the architecture piece for us. There's additional roof. This is a roof deck, seeing where you can't tell, but you're 5 stories above the ground here, right? And taking in Mount Hood in the background and pulling it into the foreground and sort of creating nature where there are natural places where there wouldn't be any otherwise. As you move into the interior, there's a lot of great spaces for people to connect. There's like 35 of these kitchens. Nike, everybody uses the stairs at Nike, so we created these light corridors, so light shafts where there's skylights and vertical movement through the building, so that people aren't using the elevators and they're able to move around and get exercise. There's color coding, so all the wings are a different color, and a lot of them tell a different era of Serena's life through the branded integration to give you kind of an intuitive sense of where you are in the building, even though there's a lot of repetition. And then we brought in a lot of collaborations with different artists. This was a custom piece that was inspired by their knit footwear that ended up being this big installation in the central atrium. Jenny Sabin is the artist, who's a professor at Cornell. And then as you move through like the other spaces in the building, they all tell stories. All the restaurants are US Open, French Open, Australian Open. Environments kind of like turning those, 3-dimensionalizing those, bringing athletes to life as the sort of audience for this 10th floor auditorium. And then ultimately culminating in this like championship tennis court to symbolize her passions. And then maybe this is the last one, but this is a custom, a bridge that was designed to honor Phil Knight and his kind of heritage in covered bridge country in Southern Oregon. So last thing I wanted to show is just, this is more of that speculations piece, and it's like looking out to the future. Rather than show a lot of projects, we do have a lot of projects on the board right now. I just wanted to share this. This is our new headquarters in Portland. We bought a property during the pandemic, and it's hard to see here, but there's a warehouse back here. this is an art gallery and this is our fabrication shop. This is a 1956 closet hut that we saved. We added on the space to the outside and built this event garden, fire pit, shade garden, covered outdoor area, and essentially kind of a creative compound to kind of project like who we have become and how can we create our own facility to sort of embody that and invite our next generation of clients and staff into that space, and also help drive and kind of defibrillate the culture in the city, because Portland's culture has taken a big hit in the last few years. So we're starting to host events and just try to like create culture and drive culture in the city. So not just think about this career as just like we're architects, we only do architecture, or interior designers. Like, we're going to build, we want to connect with people, we want to drive thinking in the city, and also just create a place that's like really fun to go to work. And because everything we're doing here, like, it's hard but it's fun. And every day is different. When we go to work, we're always working on different challenges. We never do the same project twice. And we're really excited now to be in this new facility, able to leverage that outwards. And I think now this is done, but the one thing we did here, which is really fun, is we brought in, we designed and created these cross-laminated timber conference rooms and brought them in and erected them. And now we're kind of working in spaces that are analogous to a lot of the stuff that we do for our clients.
Thank you so much. We probably have a little bit of time for questions. If anybody either on Zoom or in the room would like to ask any.
When it came to those larger projects, did you have to use VR?
Yeah, we did, but I wouldn't say we had to. I think we did just because it was fun. Like, and we want, you know what I mean? Like, we did. I didn't show it here, but one project we designed a cruise ship for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines that's being built right now. It's the biggest cruise ship in the world, and we did the top 5 decks. And that ship actually has a very, very integrated VR design process in it. The client actually built a room where you go in and it's not all goggles. It's like a combination of glasses and full projection, and it's pretty wild. And they do like full rendered out, like at every stage of design, they basically invest a lot into that model, so that as it's all the executives essentially and all the design partners can go in and basically walk around the ship live. That's like kind of the most interesting use of it that we've seen. But for us, it's more novelty, I would say, in terms of the design process. But we do use a lot of rendering, modeling, and computer simulation, I guess.
When it comes to your design process, how physical are you? How, do you do physical models and hand drawings and sketches and stuff?
Yeah. We were having this conversation too. So most of our documentation is in Revit, but almost none of the early work is in Revit. It's really hard to make creative presentation drawings in Revit, we find. I was trained before computers, so it's all about line weights and pencils and drawings to me and hand models. And so that craft is a big part of I think you can't have a great project if you don't have great drawings. If the drawings don't appear or feel crafted, it's unlikely that the results will be that. And so we spent a lot of time really kind of honing in on that early. I'm very hands-on. I spend about half my time drawing, if things are going well. That's what I'm trying to do. And then I take those drawings, which are done in a computer, mostly in a computer, some hand sketching, some iPad. I use Morpholio Trace a lot. And then I usually lay stuff down to CAD, and then but that's a CAD that has line weights on paper sheets. It's not like model space or whatever. And then that turns into the technical drawings with the staff. There's some projects that I'm not doing the early creative work on, and there people are doing those differently. We use a lot of Enscape, which is a plugin, I guess, for Revit that has become a really important tool for us. But I would say, even if it's not by hand, it's very much inspired by that sort of handmade outcome and that handcrafted feel. Yeah.
So you mentioning the cruise ship made me think, I heard mention of cruise ships being built in very, very short timeframes.
Yeah.
And some of your work seems to be like trying to get to that point.
Yeah.
Is there something that you learned from the cruise ship
Yeah,
kind of construction process that you?
totally. Yeah, so our ship is being built in Finland. And so I got to go over there a few times and spend time in this facility. And what's amazing, so cruise ships are very simple, really. Like, they seem really complicated, but like a building skin is very complicated. A cruise ship is basically steel plates welded together and painted. Like, there's basically there's very little insulation, there's no waterproofing, there's no flashing, it's just like a very simple thing. So what they do is there's rooms and blocks, and so they're just steel blocks, and they build them into these like 5-story high by like 5-room banks. They're called super blocks, and they have a crane that's bigger than the yard tower. It's like, 22-story tall crane that can lift up these blocks. And the really cool thing about it is they figured out that it's way easier to build upside down, because like most of the work they're building is like sprinklers and lights and plumbing and whatnot. And rather than working off ladders, they can work on the ground. So they can lay it all out, build it, and then the crane takes it up and flips it over, and they move it in. And then they just weld them together. And it's pretty wild. So they start, like, all the different parts of the building are all being built at the same time. And it's a really interesting process. Yeah.
You mentioned that you've added a fabrication yard to space for
Yeah.
your new office. What excites you about being able to do that stuff in-house?
Yeah.
Allowing.
Yeah. There's a bunch of aspects to it. And there was like, they'd hit on like 7 channels, so it felt like it was probably a good idea. But I mean, I think the very basic thing is just like, you have to be hands-on to be good at this. Like, I'm very happy. I love that you guys are doing design build here. Like, I don't think you need to like be a plumber for 10 years, but like, if you plumb one sink and set a toilet and do some valve work and set a door and do some trim and sheetrock and paint, like, just even building one tiny home, for example, like, would give you such an incredible leg up on 80% of the architects out there, right? In terms of being able to know how to do this stuff, how to think about sequencing it, how to talk to people in the field and get like the confidence, or get their confidence, which is a big part of what I think we all have to do. So I want to use it to train our staff, for one. People are inherently love making stuff. And I think we've just gotten disconnected from making in a hands-on way. So I think we want to reconnect to making. So beyond that, just that act of like making physical things. And then I think, like, from a business point of view, there's a handful of different things where we can monetize it. Like, we do a lot of hotel rooms, for example. We can like tape out a full and frame up a mock-up, and you sublease that space to our client for a period of time and have like a working laboratory. We can build prefab modules. We can build tiny homes. We can build buildings on wheels. Like, we can work on vans, and like, so I think there's that kind of level where our idea isn't that we want to like mass produce anything there, but like one of the first projects I want to do is a wood-fired sauna that's modular, maybe even on wheels. And that's something that we could design, fabricate, use to train people, and then put on our, either sell or rent, or, photograph it and make it something that's available for a price tag, and then have a partner that'll fabricate them. So it's a way to sort of like seed sort of productization, and also get hands-on. And also help train people. The other thing is like, just if you're, it's really hard, I think, to be innovative if you don't have like a resource where like, even just something as simple as a siding detail, like if we want to do a wood siding and we want it to not just be like, go to Home Depot and buy, shingles and put them up with that cabot stain. Right now we have to like hire a contractor to make us samples, and it really gets in the way. Whereas like this, basically we can go into the shop, cut our own wood, try some different vinegar stains, look at different fat, like start to build mock-ups and kind of even on that level, try to get to like a more boutique outcome because we have that facility in-house. So I don't know, there's a lot of aspects, and maybe we'll start designing furniture or products, lights. But right now it's more of like, if you build it, we'll figure out how to use it.
We have a question via Zoom that's asking, how is Skylab starting to think about a cradle to cradle process that takes a holistic approach to material choice and their lifespan before and after the building?
Yeah, I think, most of our projects right now are heading down the cross laminated timber road, I would say, which, not sure if that's necessarily cradle to cradle, but I think it's lower carbon, it's arguably a rapidly renewable resource. It uses less materials because we can expose the structure as the finish. Something like that, you could take down and relocate and reverse engineer the process. So I think probably starts inherently with the structural system. Some of the buildings we're looking at like drilled helical piers instead of concrete foundations, some kind of alternate ways so where you don't have to excavate and you don't have to pour concrete, and you can like touch the site more lightly. And then if you do want to relocate one of these buildings, like the whole home process was meant to be able to reverse and either add on to or move or sell. So I think some of that thinking probably hits it pretty well, but and in terms of like finish selection and things like that, I think we try to use local materials. We try to use reclaimed materials where we can. Try to make the buildings super weather or super energy efficient. Hopefully have like power generation in them and water reuse. Like Nike's a LEED Platinum Plus building. It exceeded LEED Platinum. We use all the rainwater, all the mechanical systems in that building are covered with solar panels to screen them from above. So I don't know, there's not like a one thing I think, but I think all of those are kind of layers that move us closer to having a more sustainable outcome. One of the things I'm really keyed into is just making buildings that nobody wants to tear down. Because I think that's actually the biggest waste we have is tearing down buildings, and because they're built poorly or designed poorly and they don't last. I think if you build something right, it probably can have a 100 or 200 year lifespan and not have to go into the landfill to begin with.
One of your projects on Schweitzer being about kind of like future developments of the project as well. Sorry, like how, so I feel like that's part of that cradle to cradle situation as well, but also like how many of those projects do you kind of design for future iterations instead of what's built and then like what could potentially happen afterward?
Not sure if I totally understand that.
So with
Powder
Schweitzer,
Mountain,
we have,
Josh?
what?
The triangular one on Powder Mountain.
Yes, the hotel where we have, and then you showed us a couple of plans of like future
Yeah,
iterations.
okay, yeah.
And
Like
so I
the
was trying to
adaptive
like, how
planning.
many other projects or like how often does that take a feature of your projects?
Right. Meaning like what's like, how might we move into some of those other buildings or?
Like, not necessarily, like, just how many projects or like how often do you guys think about how to develop the kind of
Oh,
community
like
after?
a longer term master plan? Yeah, I would say most of our projects, because like a lot of times what we're trying to talk to clients about is like even if you're just doing a smaller project, like let's open the lens up and let's figure out where this property is going. And let's like kind of move the chess pieces around so that we make sure that what we're doing now isn't going, you're not going to regret it later, like because you didn't take the time to zoom out. So I think whether or not we've been hired to do a master plan, we're always kind of trying to bring that lens to it. That's definitely an important factor. And then a lot of our projects, we would like come up with a master plan and then help them with the phasing diagram and think through like what the best sequence to do this is, where you're gonna get the most value and the least impact, like the least negative impact from future construction, and start to get like return on investment sooner and things like that.
So I love that when you're looking at the building, you're considering the outdoor spaces and the use of native plants. I'm wondering if you are ever considering the deep history of the site as an indigenous place and what the site might have been used for before, and the peoples who had lived in the place in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
And
mean,
today,
yeah,
so.
I mean, sometimes that information is very, very available and very meaningful. Sometimes it's a little more generic. Recently, we did a master plan for Sandpoint, which was really interesting. We just like through our research process, there was some information about the tribes that had been there, but there wasn't a huge amount. But we went back even further and we went to like the Missoula floods and we realized that Lake Ponderay was actually the ice dam where the floods started. And then we found this sort of like flood myth in the native, in the museum actually there. And so we started to connect the dots between these layers that hadn't necessarily been done before. And then integrated into that sort of, into their public spaces, essentially like an interpretive center and we actually took the Missoula flood like landforms that you can find in a lot of places, and we brought it into our, like that's actually what was driving our design. So it's like I'm not gonna be a technical like expert in any one native culture, for example, but like trying to find this way to like tell a rich story and create the foundation for then somebody to come and give them the space where they could tell that deeper story, but have it be connected to something physical rather than just a plaque on the wall kind of thing. That's really where my mind is at. But we're very, very interested in that. And also, you know, it's also something that you have to be careful with, right? Because like unless you do it in the right way, it can actually be taken in the wrong way. So like making sure you're bringing in those tribes, you know, into the process and not just assuming that you can speak about them from your own point. That's a really important piece. We work for Timberline Lodge and Mount Hood, and like that's a big piece of the work we're doing there, for example. And they're on the design team essentially. So yeah, I would say create like an integrative story that's not a plaque, and then work with the most legitimate partners you can find if you're going to go there to make sure you don't step in.
So, sorry, we have another question on Zoom that beat you, and then maybe we have time for one more after that. Which they're asking, how much does music inspire your design process? You mentioned it multiple times through your presentation, and you're a guitar player. It looks like you collaborate through music, and it looks like it's a place you come back to.
Yeah, it's funny. I can actually give just a lecture on the book, and the whole book is about like music and improvisational music, and like I have a big passion for improvisational music, but I see a lot of analogies between the design process and composition and music, and like both from like the structured sort of technical sort of theory basis, but also from the like intuitive response and interpretive side. And I feel like all like moving through a building to me is analogous to like moving through a like the structure of a song essentially, and having that sort of like rhythm that's built up, and it's usually built up to some sort of like climactic moment, and then there's release and get back into the end of the story, and it's like it's a whole thing, right? And I think there's a huge amount of parallels, and I think like on some level, like I also think it's important to not over intellectualize everything, and it's like sometimes you just have an intuitive response to something and like that, that's okay and it's meaningful and it's like, you need to find a way to weave it in, like hopefully to a narrative, but it's like, you got to follow your instincts and trust them, and I think that's something you can learn a lot from musicians and even musicians that play together in a shorthand format. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess Jarrett had a question that I cut him off, so.
Yeah, I just had a question. So what were some of the challenges that you faced when it came to that larger projects? Because of some of the previous stuff was quite small.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of that was trying to like predict how much labor it would take to do a project like that as a business, like from a design point of view, like we pretty apt at it pretty quickly, like it wasn't a huge challenge. There's some stuff in Nike about just like managing the budget and like how much complexity we could afford in the facade and how much repetition the building could handle and whatnot. But like Nike at one point, we had 28 people working on one project in a firm that was 28 people large. And then trying to figure out how do you land that with other business, like to make sure that like, you don't just like hit a cliff and all of a sudden like 14 people don't have anything to do. So it was almost more of a business challenge than a design challenge. I mean, there was plenty of design challenges in it, but there were, it was really a business challenge, I would say primarily. Is there one more?
Yeah, final question.
Oh, yes, okay, I was gonna say that, what I found really interesting was all of the buildings had like a heart and a soul and a story, like you said. So when you are just starting a project and you have like a blank slate, what's the first step that you take to find that?
Yeah, we were talking about this in the discussion earlier, but I would say that every one of our projects starts with like this sort of research phase, which I actually, I like to say it also helps like manage your creative block or, procrastination issues. But like you can spend some time like trying to get into a project and not worry about like staring a blank sheet of paper in the face and going, where do I take this, by going through this research process. So like we look at it as like left brain, right brain. So like an analytical process combined with an intuitive process. So analytical would be like history of the site, the ecology of the site, the zoning, the geotechnical report, like all the things, the client's program, like really spending as much learning about the site as possible or the project as possible. And then combine that with this sort of storytelling, narrative, intuitive response, like might be like a thing about natural materials or like color palette on the site, or there might be a poetics, like reflection on the lake, and I mean, whatever that element. So you're kind of combining those two levels of thinking into a document where then we try to craft a narrative statement. And then that's really the point on the project. And it's got like the visual collaging, and then it also has a text on it.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.